Welcome to The Ethical Stitch, where fashion meets integrity and style gets a conscience. I'm your host, Michelle Alleyne, fashion strategist, educator, and sustainability geek. Let's unravel what it really means to create, shop, and live ethically. Hey, Stitch Gang! Welcome back to The Ethical Stitch, the podcast where fashion gets real, raw, and responsibly redesigned. I'm your host, Michelle Alleyne. This is episode 5, and every week we dig deep into what really matters: the planet, the people behind the clothes, and the power of personal style. No filters, no fluff, but a whole lot of soul. All right, grab your matcha and let's step into the green room here at The Ethical Stitch. We're pulling back the curtain on what happens beyond the runways, beneath the trends, and inside the systems. We've got honest voices and unfiltered stories. Now listen, today's guest, she doesn't follow fashion's rhythm. She composes her own, a curator of conscious luxury, redefining what it means to wear with purpose. Casey Dworkin is the former founder and creative director of Sylvan New York, a sustainable footwear brand that didn't just flirt with innovation, it flirted with Apple leather. Yes, Apple leather. Circular design and soul-deep storytelling. For nearly a decade, she led a purpose-driven brand that made eco-luxury look effortless. And now she's behind the scenes helping brands, big and emerging, create strategies and design systems that are not only beautiful, but actually mean something. She's a creative director, a sustainability strategist, an educator, an intuitive thinker who brings elegance to ethics and clarity to chaos. And at the core of it all is one word: regeneration. Of materials, of systems, and of self. Casey, welcome to The Ethical Stitch.
It's so nice to be here. This is my first podcast post being a brand founder. So this is the first former founder bio. And it's just nice to know that the work is bigger than the brand, you know?
Huge. I love it so much. I love your story and what you've done and what you're doing now. So let's get into it. Looking back at your experience building a sustainable footwear brand using, as I mentioned before, Apple leather, what was your biggest challenge in balancing aesthetic innovation with real sustainability? And how did you push through?
Such a good question. Something that you really had to balance. And I always kind of joke that sustainable practices feel like a game of whack-a-mole, where you knock one mole down and 4 more pop up and you're trying to figure out which ones to hit and at what rate. Something that really was quite challenging was trying to figure out how to make a product that looked as good as I could possibly make it, something to really compete in the luxury fashion space.
Mm-hmm.
That was still utilizing components and materials that met all of my environmental criteria. And that means on a logistic decision-making process, sometimes you have to make slightly less sustainable decisions to make a product look the way that you want it. And you really have to think through what's the greater impact that this product is going to have on the market versus, there's the pricing factor of, do I go with a component A if it's $10 versus component B if it's $5 per shoe, or thinking through what if there's a higher plastic content rate in a certain material, but it comes in more available colors? Is that going to be received better? And just really on that logistic level of every decision has 100 micro decisions underneath it, and trying to figure out where are those big driving decision-making factors and where is there a little bit of room to play, and how does it affect the end product?
Wow, that whacking of a mole. I was never really good at that at Coney Island. I tried it. Didn't go so well. So
It's stressful. It's a stressful game.
Oh, wow. I mean, it sounds like if you weigh the cost, let's say you could price it wherever it needed to be. And then I don't know, the color options. I'm trying to figure that out. It's such a balancing act. Wow. How did you do that? What was it, 10 years you had the company?
Yeah, well, just about 8.5. 8.5 that I had the company. So I was making sort of my own material decisions. It kind of differs every time. I really like to think about how something is going to be received. And I think that's sort of my product design education background, is really thinking through end user.
Hmm.
But I would really think about, like, how is this particular shoe style going to make the biggest impact? Like, everything for me was ultimately led by this, like, decision making and sustainable values, right? So like values were always sort of at the top of that pyramid, but underneath those values you have these micro decisions. So like if my main goal was to get plant-based footwear in front of as many eyes as possible, that sometimes meant that I had to make decisions that sort of are in that whack-a-mole game, right? Of like working with things that were still in progress. I think
Right.
that's also a hard part of working with things that have been so innovative, is they're not necessarily finished in terms of their development. So being an early adopter means that you sort of have to change things as you're in real time. But for me, it was like, what's the biggest thing I can possibly, like, what's the big pillar? What's at that top of the pyramid? And it's getting people to understand that an apple leather shoe looks amazing. And so if I want to compete in that space, I want to make sure that I have full control over what that visual aesthetic is of the final product.
Hmm.
And so sometimes that means having to make decisions along the way that aren't necessarily, like, if you're only being guided by environmental impact, I probably would have been working with a different type of textile altogether. But
Interesting.
through the process, because things have emerged and things have really continued to develop, like, had I never done some of those intermediary steps, it wouldn't have led me further down the journey of the material and component space.
Wow, interesting. Let me ask you this. Today, designers are flooded with fabric options. I mean, you're mentioning that some of yours that were innovated at the time, have had some staying power, I'm assuming, I hope. But all are biodegradable. What do you recommend for folks or designers trying to make smarter, lower impact material choices today?
My best answer to this is I'm a firm believer that biodegradability is not the metric to look at in terms of footwear and specific fashion categories. So that's the first point I want to make, is that when you're looking at complex products, you really need to think about the end life, right? And like what's happening at the product's end of life in its full life cycle. And the more complex a product, specifically a shoe, where you have 40 to 60 different components that can make up one product, you have to really disassemble all 40 and 60 components to have single stream recycling system set in place, or a single stream where you take just the plant-based components and put them in an environment where something can be biodegradable. So I always encourage people, because I think biodegradability is such an important thing to think about when we're looking at plant and bio-based materials. But in terms of fashion products, I think it often becomes kind of a misnomer of what the metric is when we think of circularity, or what's that full circle? Is there a way to close the loop? What is the loop? Each product kind of has its own different loops to look through. So that's kind of my first standpoint, is I always try to guide people a little bit away from biodegradability, even though I do think it's important to understand what makes a material different. If it is biodegradable, what that means, because it might not be biodegradable in the greater context of a fashion product. So that's number one. And number two is a really good parlay, because I'm currently working in the next gen material space with
Yay.
a company that I have been championing for the last 5 years of my career, even before I was working with them. But there's an incredible company I work with called Uncaged Innovations, and
Yes.
they're a grain-based leather alternative that is working on biodegradability as well. So that is something that's important to the company. But it's a bio-based material that's completely fossil fuel free, and it's really like the pinnacle of innovation of what next gen materials are and have the ability to become.
Oh. I am so excited. I got the goosies. Now you're talking. Thank you. Yay. That's so exciting. Oh, I love to hear about these breakthroughs that are moving forward. You're in such a futurist space, and I love that area as well. So it can be an added challenge because now you have to make sure it actually works, right? And test it.
Absolutely. It scratches like all of the itches that I have as a designer, as an entrepreneur, as someone who's always been really interested in material science and how materials work. There's just so much that goes into the making and the development and the testing and the durability. And then on top of that, like you have a really beautiful final product
Right.
that has the capacity to replace leather in pretty much every application. So there's a couple different categories that the company is focused on at the moment, but it's a super exciting time to be in the material space, and a really personal evolution for me, having tested like I was a big champion for apple leather, but I've worked with more than a dozen different components and bio-based and plant-based leathers and leather alternatives. So it's nice to see how things have continued to evolve in the space.
So is this one you just mentioned? This your new favorite?
It's been my favorite is the thing about that. So I think for footwear in particular is such a specific category that a part of what we're looking to do with Uncaged is make sure that it's viable for footwear. So currently this material is commercially available for like small leather goods, which I think we need to call small vegan leather goods, or small non-leather goods.
We can take it vegan leather. We can take it back
I
and
don't
have it
know.
do something clean.
It depends on the day. I think there needs to be some type of third category, but I don't know. There's the conversation of like vernacular and shared language of describing something that someone can understand, but also giving something the ability to not necessarily be an alternative, but to be its own thing. So there's merit in both, but it depends on who you speak to. Just like so many things, right? It's a very gray area, and different. You talk to 10 people, you'll get 10 different opinions.
True. I'm so excited. On to the next question, though. I do want to ask about a few other things, but wow. Yay, something to look forward to. Transparency. It's such a buzzword now. I think you built a brand that was rooted in it. What does real transparency look like? And can you address it as it relates to those 40 to 60 pieces that are in a shoe?
Totally.
Can we can we minimize that without affecting the comfort?
Perhaps. It depends on where you're manufacturing. So I've got technical answers for that and then kind of more emotional answers, right? But like, so you mentioned I'm an educator. I teach very much within this space. I teach fashion design students, product design students, fashion merchandising students, depending on what courses I'm teaching. And often there's one shoe that I really like. It's from Camper, and it's designed for disassembly. It's 4 components. I use it in like all of my teaching decks when I'm talking about different ways to practice sustainability in terms of what are you looking for? Like what do you personally prioritize and what do you think a company is prioritizing? So when you're thinking about raw materials and just sort of product end life, the real goal for that is designed for disassembly. So the fewer components you have, the easier something is going to be to break down to have an end of life. And I think having 4 components versus 60 components, I mean, it's a world of difference. But it depends. There's a lot of supply chain things you need to set up in order to do that. It depends on who you're manufacturing with, how much custom development you're doing. Then it becomes a financial conversation for development and doing things on your own. So there's certainly a lot to look into. And maybe that's a good transition into transparency because I think something I tried to do with my brand was just like bring people along the journey whenever I had the space to talk about things. It's hard to build and be visible at the same time when you've got a really small team.
Mhm.
But I always just like to talk about what goes into things because I think it's really simple to come up with what people think could work versus like really getting into the nitty gritty, right? And kind of sharing some of the greater details of like, sure, wouldn't it be great if everything was 4 components and all materials were biodegradable and every company actually cared about the planet and the people and the inhabitants and the animals? Like that would be great. But
You're designing my
unfortunately,
world there. I think you just designed my world. Thank you.
You're welcome. But that's what we do as designers, right? It's world building. So it's not just the product, it's not just the brand and the DNA. It's like we've built out this fantasy, which hopefully can become a reality, but like it's building out the worlds that you want to exist and finding the ways to make products that fit into that world. And so some of the transparency is talking about why we don't live in that world.
I
Like,
don't.
here's some of the hurdles. These are the barriers to entry. And unfortunately, there's so many of them. And so I think just kind of talking through why things have been so difficult and where brands struggle. I think I tried to be as transparent as possible about closing a business
Right, right.
and
I
just
get that.
being open to answering questions. But I think it's also just kind of who I am as a person. So I think that feels the most authentic to me in terms of how I describe where I'm at in any given day or any given business or situation. So it's kind of always come a little bit naturally.
And I think I remember you saying you were born on Earth Day, so
That's true.
that have something to do with it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, from a young age, that is what got me interested in sustainability early on. Like I founded and presided over my high school's environmental club, and was just trying to figure out like community organized events and ways to prioritize nature well before it was like en vogue.
Right?
But it was also before it existed in the fashion industry. So like I always just thought I had two siloed interests that kind of
Hmm.
had nothing to do with each other. And I think that's also a strength of finding kind of anyone's path, whether it be sustainability or otherwise. It's like how do you merge the things that make you unique and find some new compound.
Love it. All right. If you could snap your fingers and shift two or three major gears in the industry right now, what would you change to take us from surface level sustainability to systematic transformation?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't at first say I think everybody should be considering next gen materials. I think supply chain and material components making up such a huge portion. I mean, it could be up to two-thirds of a company's environmental impact is just based on their raw materials alone. So I really wish there were kind of bigger conversations being held around leather and synthetics and kind of the environmental impact that goes along with those materials. So I think that would be sort of my number one. Number two would be I think just I want better product. I want companies to be designing cool shit that people want to
Right.
wear.
Right. Cool shit that's clean shit in terms of the environment, right?
Totally. Like, I think it was Business of Fashion put out an article this week that was talking about like the marketability of sustainability. And I think that really got all of sustainability sort of this like product feature wrap. Like how something is sustainable, that's not its defining characteristic, right? It's just a piece of the puzzle. And I think the entire industry got really focused on if we market sustainably, then we'll have a sustainable customer base.
Ah,
I think the thought process was really rooted in business, right? Like we need products to be marketable and saleable so that they can be profitable so businesses can do well. But I think I would really love to see the industry step away from sustainability as a marketing tactic. Like it's not a marketing play. It goes back to the world building. It's like, why do we need to live in this? It shouldn't be a utopia to think that we shouldn't be exploiting people, planets, and animals to build a fashion system.
exactly. Thank you. You hit that so on the head. How do we get those big players to move on this? I mean, you just said, I guess it's about profitability, but how do we get them to move? I mean, okay, maybe we should create, or maybe you create that to design of four pieces instead of 40 to 60. And do you sell it, give it to them? How do we get them to jump on this boat that we're in?
Yeah, I think it comes both from like the top down and the bottom up,
Okay.
like consumer facing, where like we need there to be a market need
Hmm.
where like
Right.
people who are purchasing holding brands accountable for their actions and not just saying, I would rather have a haul, with 40 items that I purchased this month of the trendiest things. Like, I think we really need to move away. I mean, this is a whole other topic, but I think we have become trained to think that the value of products is cheaper than what the cost to make products truly is.
Yes.
So I think we need a consumer perception shift, but I think we also need decision makers at top companies to care more.
Hmm.
And sometimes I think fashion, when I think of fashion, I think of innovation. Like you think that the fashion industry is making all of these like cerulean blue decisions, right? Of like, we're the guiders of the conversation. So like, why is this not a part of that innovation? I think we need to see sustainability as a way to build an entire company. And I think we need decision makers to say, this is important to me, and therefore it will also be important to our consumers.
Fantastic. You seem to have been deep in the lab with brands working on new materials. I mean, we touched on that, but can you tell us a bit more of what it's been like for you working in next gen, but also working with other brands and helping them to emerge? And what advice would you give designers who want to join this wacky industry?
Great, great questions. I was having a really amazing conversation the other day with a handbag and footwear company that felt like there's kind of a group of us that have kind of emerged together. There's like maybe 10 to 12 brands that have been focused in the next gen material space for the last, 4 to 8 years that have tested and I think have like a really similar mindset. And I was reading a book by Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. See if I can think. It's a book on creativity.
Hmm.
And she talks a lot about how ideas don't, it's called Big Magic, the name of it. Fantastic book. And it talks about how like ideas are almost conscious and they float from entity to entity based on who can bring those ideas to fruition. So I think one of the concepts that I've really latched onto is that like there are multiple designers and multiple humans right now that are kind of part of almost this collective consciousness of saying we want to try things and do things a little bit differently. And we've sort of all been on the same tip for around the same time frame, which has been super exciting. It's like there are new innovations that are available to test. Sometimes it comes with a little extra time built in. So I think that would be one of my, just like a point to note is that you might have to do a couple of extra prototypes. You might need to do a little hand holding with a factory to say, I'm
Yeah.
interested in testing something new. Have you worked with something like this? Are you interested in working with something like this? That can also be a big barrier. A lot of factories, especially in specific countries, are like, this is the way we've always done it.
Yes.
So you need a little bit of like I don't want to say you need a little curiosity, a little rebelliousness to be like, just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean that needs to continue to be how it's done.
Oh my goodness. Shake up these factories, wake them up.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you do hold their hand and train them, they're kind of willing to work with you. The factories that I've worked with in the past.
Yeah,
But
most of them. And then I've had other factories that kind of roll their eyes, and then I say, it's not a partner I want to build a business with. So
right.
that's the other thing too. It's just sort of like, it can certainly be hard to find manufacturing partners, but it's still worth it to have people who are willing to work with you.
Okay, Casey, that was incredible. I'd love to give a Stitch Mob shout out. So each week here, we give a shout out to a change agent helping to restitch the future of fashion. Casey, do you happen to have a Stitch Mob MVP for this week? A brand, a maker, someone behind the scenes that's disrupting that you might
Mm.
want to give a shout out to?
I'm going to shout out to Miss Stephanie Downs, who is the CEO at Uncaged, who's been forging this path for the next gen material that I've been fortunate enough to learn even more about. And it's just been so incredible to watch the vision of a founder come to life in a way that's just like she knows exactly where she wants this business to go. And her heart is in the absolute right place
Oh,
in
yeah.
terms of why she's doing things, how she's making things. The amount of integrity that this woman has is just so incredible. And the change that she's building in the industry is something that I am like fully rallying behind.
Love it. You keep doing that. You keep building my world. I love that. Wow, that was spectacular. All right. If you take one thing away from today, let it be this: intention is the new luxury. The stories behind what you wear really matter. So ask better questions, demand better answers, and stitch with purpose because fashion with heart is the flex. That's a wrap for episode 5 of The Ethical Stitch. Big, huge love to Casey. Oh my goodness. a brain that I so admire. I just love your work and what you do and how you speak on it. I'm so into you. So thank you for coming on and dropping all those wonderful gems and for showing us what it means to lead with clarity, creativity, and certainly care. So thank you so much. Everyone, if you felt this convo, hit that subscribe button. Text it to a friend, tag us at The Ethical Stitch or at Michelle Alleyne Official. We're on all the platforms, and trust, we're just warming up. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for tuning into The Ethical Stitch. If you loved this episode, share it, rate it, and tag me at Michelle Alleyne Official. The revolution in fashion starts with awareness, and you're already a part of it. Until next time, keep it ethical.